I'm Aubrey Sitterson, and this is SKALD. You're listening to the only story that matters. This is true oral storytelling. I write every episode myself, and then, like the Scandinavian bards known as SKALDs, I perform everything in one single, flawless take. This is the best episode yet, so you should absolutely start right here. Afterward, if you want to catch up, you can listen to previous episodes of the podcast for free, or buy the prose volumes on Amazon for only $2.99. This isn't me reading you a story. This is me telling you a story. This is SKALD, Part 60. It was chaos. Pure, unmitigated, distilled chaos. And Maul loved it. He relished it. It empowered him. It spoke to him on a level beneath the primal, a level more foundational than any of the feral, savage urges that motivated him. It overjoyed him as he charged through the city of Ravenna, forcing that lazy, cowardly, corpulent child ahead, prodding him mercilessly with that long, black, gleaming spear. Whenever the boy slowed, whenever his thick, heavy legs failed to move quickly enough, which was often, Maul would roar and jab him with the head of that spear, the one made of some substantial stone, the one with the perfectly weighted head, that shard of obsidian veined with glowing streams of crimson. He wouldn't deliver a killing blow, or even a wounding one. No, Maul would simply touch the tip of that spearhead to the boy, simply graze the proctor's back with that razor-sharp point, and suddenly, like magic, speed, quickness, urgency, they would all return to the boy's step. They were a ridiculous pair, an inversion of Ravenna's natural state. Because here, a proctor, a high-ranking proctor, a procurer, the son of Henno himself, he was forced into action. He was abused and castigated. He was reminded of that which comprises this, the real world. He was taught that painful, unavoidable lesson, the fact that at its heart, at its root, the world is suffering, and your existence in it, pain, gore, and viscera, like that which poured out of the countless scratches in his back, soaking his black cloak and pouring out of the rents in his darkening garments. On a normal day, on any other day, the pair would have been stopped because clearly this was not part of Henno's plan. This pair worked not for the elevation of Ravenna, but instead for its destruction. It was nothing to see a proctor, especially a procurer, accompanied by a worker, by a slave, but for the power to be out of the proctor's hands, for Henno's artfully woven bureaucracy to be torn, for his spell to be broken. That was unheard of. Not to mention who it was that had broken the spell. Not a conscientious worker, not a cunning striver and schemer, but a brute, an oaf, a savage, the one true king of flames and ashes. Maul. On any other day, someone, anyone, everyone would have stopped them, would have defended the proctor from his attacker, would have found a new, terrible hole in which to cast Maul, a place more terrible than even the pit to which he had already been condemned. But this was no other day. This was a day unlike any other, because Ravenna, that ever-growing, cancerous city-state, was crumbling as its very foundations were shook beneath it. It was chaos. Pure, beautiful, panic-stricken chaos. And Maul loved it. He loved the rumble under his feet. He loved the cracks in the earth as that monster, the Titan, the one that he had released, continued its rampage, continued to dig through stone and dirt, to knock aside anyone foolhardy enough to stop it, continued to chip away at all that the city was built upon and tear it apart from underneath. The ground shook as Maul charged across it, forcing his captive ahead of him. It shivered and groaned as massive fissures tore open, as streets shattered into rubble and buildings spasmed as their bedrock was crushed into gravel. Maul loved it. He loved it. He loved the chaos. He loved the destruction because it was the best way. It was the only way to get what he required. The only way for him to get to his home, to his realm, to his kingdom, to his throne, was by riding a wave of cataclysmic fury. The boy, the proctor, the procurer led the way. But it was Maul that forced him onward, cackling with glee as he saw what became of the factories, the countless sweatshops that lined every street, the ones that sat atop the gloomy cellars and caves that passed for tenements. Maul felt something stir inside him, something he thought lost, and he flashed a lascivious grin as he watched people pour from the factories as the walls fell down around their ears. It was as Patro had said, as Patro had claimed, as Patro had promised. Without the Titan's milk to fuel the workers, without that bubbling green liquid to fuel the machines, the factories could not run, could not operate, could not continue to debase and defile what little humanity was left in Ravenna's people. And with the factory's foundations shaken, with them shattered and broken, the factories themselves couldn't even stand. And as that precarious house of cards collapsed, out of them, out of each of the once productive, once bustling, squalid factories poured workers, slaves, and proctors alike, terrified, angry, and bloodthirsty, released from the structures that Henno had built around them, released from the gallows that they all stood upon, waiting for the quick, savage release of death. The workers were, for the first time, free. No machines to labor over, with no raw materials to turn into fuel for ravenous growth. They had no purpose, and a man with no purpose wants nothing, wants for nothing but destruction. So that is what they created. That was their new project, their new purpose. The workers, the slaves, they took to the street with stick, with stone, and with flame, eager to hasten the fall of the city that had been built upon their backs, the city that had devoured their children to sustain its growth, the city guarded and protected by them, by those cowardly villains, the ones who hid behind their swords, their spears, their whips, and their damnable black cloaks. The proctors. And so, as they meted out destruction, as they cast seething hellfire into every street, as they brought death and chaos to every alley in that convulsing city, they paid special attention to, they made sure to seek out proctors. The ones who had abused them, the ones who had debased their fellow citizens so that they might be elevated, the ones who, worst of all, had debased themselves with the false hope of salvation, with the empty promise of elevation. The workers, the slaves, they turned on those traitorous, vicious monsters. They cast down whatever tools, whatever makeshift weapons they carried, because they had no wish to alienate themselves from this task. They had no wish to be isolated from the grisly nature of their newest purpose. They seized the proctors, those howling, squealing, begging, pleading proctors, and they tore them limb from limb, bathing, cleansing themselves, purifying themselves in their blood. And Maul loved it. So as the slaves revolted, as they turned on their self-made masters, as they filled the growing fissures with twisted, broken bodies cloaked in black, as the proctors themselves, the ones fortunate enough to not yet be captured, ran, panic-stricken through the streets, stumbling and falling only to be set upon by hordes of rage-filled workers, by rage-fueled slaves, Maul's path was clear. He drove the boy forward, faster and faster, kicking his heels when he dragged them, slapping his head when he lowered it. He only stopped when necessary. He only stopped to fight. Not the proctors, though. No, those fools were too cowardly to try and save anyone's skin but their own. Maul only stopped when he needed to fight his fellow workers. Seeing the proctor, the procurer, the son of Henno himself, the workers were sent into a frenzy. They wanted nothing more than to sink their fingers, their long, lean fingers, gnarled from a lifetime of agonizing labor. They wanted nothing more than to dig them into the corpulent, wasteful flesh of that sobbing child, the one who had benefited, who had flourished and gorged himself to excess based on their suffering, based on their slavery. Was it not right that they now consume him? But while Maul had no love for the boy, though he had almost run the child through himself mere moments before, now he could not allow the procurer to be taken. He needed the child alive. He needed him as a bargaining chit, one to lord over that ancient, corrupt wizard, Henno, one that would earn him passage home to his realm, to the world of men, and would allow him to put this awful, squalid, dying world behind him. So from time to time, the boy, the procurer, breathed a sigh of relief as that spear was removed from his back, albeit momentarily. He slowed slightly, as much as he would dare, and struggled not to turn around, struggled not to look back, because he had made that mistake once. He had made it, his infinite regret. When he had looked back, he had gazed upon a scene of wanton, joyous carnage, as that blackened spear jabbed and sliced, as it tore flesh from bone and drove twitching carcasses down upon the broken earth. Worst of all was he that wielded the spear, that terrible, tattooed monster, the one covered in shifting, profane sigils, the one that roared with pleasure, a terrifying rictus grin plastered on his broad, stupid face. But soon enough, the carnage would end. The slaughter would conclude, and the procurer would hear Maul's laughs turn to growls. He'd feel the spear retake its place at his back, biting mercilessly into his now ruined flesh, and then Maul would force him forward at an unbelievable, unsustainable speed, would force him forward to the tower, to that massive, looming obelisk, the one where his father, the sorcerer king of Ravna, Henno, made his home. The procurer had been holding out hope, hoping that his father's guards had stayed true, had stayed by their posts, that they still held their father's tower as an unconquerable citadel. But as Maul kicked down the door, as he shoved the procurer into the building, as they were confronted by a pack of half-wild slaves, looting the tower for anything of value, anything they could swing with malice, anything they could sink their failing teeth into, the procurer realized, miserably, that his hope was in vain. Now, his only hope was his father, the one who had invested so much in him, who had worked so hard to keep him from getting lost, to bring him back into the real world. His father, Henno, was his only hope, was the only one who could give this blood-drenched madman what he wanted, and once again, save his son. But in order for his father to save him, in order for his father to dispatch with this brutal monster, first they would need to ascend the tower, the one that shook and quavered around them, barely held up by Henno's magics, as its very foundation was eaten away by that voracious titan. And to ascend the tower, that meant the stairs. He trudged ahead as long as he could, dragging his heavy, ponderous feet up the stone stairs, forcing himself higher and higher, wheezing and gasping for breath as the very altitude of the tower deprived him of the air he needed so desperately. But his captor, that wild-eyed brute, Maul had no patience for the boy's failing lungs, so he jabbed him again and again with the spear, spurring him onward, demanding that the boy skip stairs, that he run up the tower, the sooner to reach both their goals. Because Maul's goal had changed. Patro had laid out a plan, a marvelous, impressive, impeccable plan, one that would surely result in the old wizard achieving all of his goals. But Patro's goals, they were not Maul's. For a time, their goals had aligned with one another. Patro could help Maul free himself, could possibly send him on his way, could help him escape this insufferable border realm where Maul had already lost far, far too much. But now, with the boy under his control, with Henno's son his prisoner, Maul no longer needed Patro's plan, no longer needed the wizard at all. All he needed was to reach Henno, to reach his royal quarters, and strike the deal that would bring him closer to his birthright, to that which he deserved, that which was owed to him. His throne. But as he charged up the stairs, as he forced the boy, that fleshy, ungainly child, the proctor that now, with the tables turned, with himself abused and exploited, cried out for succor, cried out for relief as Maul struggled to ascend the tower before it tumbled from the sky. He was confronted by yet another hurdle, yet another obstacle to overcome before finally, rightfully seizing what was his. Whether from exhaustion, fear, loss of blood, or some combination of the three, the boy, the proctor, the procurer could no longer keep up the driving pace that Maul had set, couldn't keep bounding up those never-ending stairs, and so, expelling what little of that thin air he had left in his lungs, the proctor collapsed, wheezing at Maul's feet. As the procurer fell upon those stone stairs, the walls around him began to shake. Not with the rhythm of the tower's crumbling foundation, but with the obscene horror of the curses that now spilled forth from Maul's lips, echoing off the stone walls and causing the boy's ears to ache almost as acutely as his lungs. Though Maul swore, kicked, punched, and stabbed with that dread, blackened spear, there was no use. The boy was spent. The procurer was exhausted, and he would not, could not move. So Maul did as he always did. He did as he must. He did the only thing he could do. He stooped down. He hoisted that massive, fleshy, gasping body up into the air. He lifted his prisoner up onto his taut, powerful shoulders, and he carried him up the tower. The proctor's body was massive, made of thick, flabby, quivering flesh. His weight was near non-existent. This sad creature, for all its bulk, was insubstantial. He was pointless, meaningless. He had no real weight, and by lifting him up, Maul was able to not only move again, but move faster than he had before, leaping up the stairs, taking them 2, even 3 at a time, as the wheezing, crying boy squirmed on his shoulders. Maul ran what felt like an eternity, dodging flagstones as they loosened from the shaking walls and crashed down to the splintering stone stairs at his feet. He charged ahead. He did as he must, because he knew that he must, that he had no other option but to reach the summit, but to trade the boy for safe passage. As he rounded what the boy promised him was the final turn in those spiraling stairs, as he approached what the procurer claimed was the final landing, the one that led directly to Hanno's royal chambers, Maul stopped short, because he was confronted by an old man who stood there waiting for him, an old man with a malevolent grin and an angry purple birthmark stretching across his face. Patro! Maul let the procurer fall to the floor unceremoniously and took up his spear with both hands. What are you doing here? Patro smiled slowly. I could ask you the same thing. Weren't we meant to meet back in the barracks, to continue on with our plan? Maul roared, shaking his spear like the mindless savage that he was. Blast your plan! I have a plan of my own now! The brutish king kicked the still gasping boy in the ribs. I have a prisoner, Hanno's son. I can get whatever I want. I don't need your plan. Patro approached slowly. You poor, stupid fool. Don't you see? The old wizard laughed. This is the plan. I researched everything. I planned everything. You don't think I knew that you'd stumble across my nephew? This craven, bloated swine? Maul was confused. And as always, with his confusion came anger. I don't understand. Patro wiped the sweat from his brow. Of course you don't. Of course you don't. I needed your charge up this tower. I needed your rush through the city to be your own idea, because I couldn't risk you being distracted, couldn't risk you thinking erroneously. that you knew better than me. Patro pointed at the heavy, richly appointed oaken door. I'll break the door down. My plan proceeds. And if you help me take back this city, take back my city, then you'll see what I can do for you. A dark pallor fell over Maul's visage. You used me. You tricked me. You don't want to help me. We had a deal. Petro sighed and rolled his eyes. Of course I used you. You are a tool, a mighty, powerful one. But still, a tool nonetheless, one to be used by your betters, those who know what the world needs and how to achieve it. Left to your own devices, you are a mean cudgel. But in my hands, you are a hammer. Maul sputtered, embarrassed, furious that he had been used, had been manipulated. But the boy, I don't need you. I'll trade him to Henno. I'd sooner join with him than you duplicitous. But before Maul could finish, he was cut off by a peal of laughter as Petro bent slightly, cackling with delight. You think that Henno, the merciless wizard king of Ravenna, you think that my brother cares for this corpulent filth? Petro spat upon the boy's face, still contorted with exhaustion and lack of breath. He cares only about moving forward, about taking what is his. The death of the boy, the death of his son. Collateral damage, an unpleasant but manageable setback, nothing more. Just as your pet's death was to you. Maul had enough. That was enough. He had been used. He had been manipulated. He had been insulted. But he would not stand there. He could not stand there and listen to this corrupt old wizard sully her name. Could not suffer him to make light of his loss, of Skog's death, of her sacrifice to help him, to help Maul, to help the one true king of flames and ashes take his rightful throne. So he lunged forward, driving his dread, blackened spear at the wrinkled folds that covered Patro's thin, ancient neck. But before he could make contact, before he could spill the wizard's corrupt blood, Maul felt the spear stop, felt the obsidian head cease its journey through the air as Patro spoke in a dire, threatening, certain tone. I can sense your bloodlust. I can taste it. But think carefully, my king. Patro moved the spear away from his neck with a single finger, a finger he then reached out to touch Maul's temple. My plan is your plan, and without me, what do you hope to accomplish? You cannot do this on your own. The boy is worthless. He is nothing. Maul, though it pained him, relented, and he growled his response. You're right. Henno worked frantically, desperately, sitting upon his throne, trying to force himself into a trance, trying to summon up magic out of nothing, trying to weave together some construct that could save the city, could save his city, could save Ravenna. but to no avail. That bubbling green ichor had ceased to flow. The machines had ceased to run. The slaves had ceased to work. The proctors had ceased to guard the city's structure, that perfectly designed frame upon which Ravenna's continued growth had been built. And now the city itself, that perfectly designed frame, the one built in accordance with the very spells that bound its people. Now, Ravenna itself crumbled, and there was naught that Henno could do about it. His tower, that inviolable obelisk, shook and rumbled around him, and he struggled to choke down the fear, to swallow the panic that filled him, the knowledge that this carefully constructed artifice, if not administered to imminently, would shatter into the millions of worthless component pieces that he had painstakingly pieced it out of. And as he sat, drenched in a cold, panicked sweat, eyes clenched shut, trying desperately to save his city, his protege, the sorceress Caleria, she who was meant to succeed him and succeed beyond his wildest dreams, she who was meant to guide Ravenna as it consumed all of creation. She tried desperately to save the deal. Before the Titan was unleashed, before chaos had begun its assault on the foundations of his city, before Henno felt his carefully woven magics unravel all around him, they had arrived. The Farah, those wild forest elves, the ones who fought Ravenna's expansion at every turn, the ones who guarded and cherished the wild places, not realizing that they were little more than fuel for Ravenna's expansion, not realizing that Ravenna was the only light that could spare them from the coming darkness, the inevitable chaos, the terrible entropy that had now attacked, had now struck them far too soon and threatened to overwhelm them all. Now, that insufferably arrogant, scowling regent, the queen of the Farah, she and her honor guard, her royal accompaniment, stood there in Henno's royal quarters, looking down their noses, frowning and sneering at him in his home, in his kingdom, in the city that he had carved out of destitute squalor. He had risen from nothing. He had overthrown his brother and built Ravenna into a force to be reckoned with. And now, as he struggled to save it, as he struggled to safeguard that which he had built, that damnable witch, that Farran queen, stood scowling at him. Caleria did her best to keep them occupied, attempting to distract them from Henno and his increasing panic, from the roars that came from the ground below, from the flaming, crumbling buildings that dotted the landscape, and from the violent shaking of the very room in which they stood. She tried to ease their fears, promised them that as soon as Henno was finished, as soon as he dealt with some pressing matters, pressing but minor, inconsequential, nothing to worry about, as soon as he was done, their deal would commence, as promised, as expected, that they would receive finally that which they sought, that which they desired. That long, twisting alabaster horn. But as Caleria tried, and for all of her incredible abilities, for all her amazing potential, failed to put the Queen of the Farah at ease. Her explanations, the Farah's scowls, and even Henno's miserable attempts at salvaging what was left of Ravenna, they all ground to a halt. Everyone in the room, everyone in Henno's royal chambers fell silent mouths held ajar, eyes grown wide as a hulking, fearsome figure emblazoned with shifting, wicked blue sigils kicked down the door, that heavy oaken portal that was strengthened, that was supposed to be strengthened by Henno's once considerable magics. They watched, shocked into silence, in equal parts awe and terror, as he stomped into the room and cast a massive, blubbery body down upon that ornately woven rug. A corpulent form, one that as it hit and rolled over, revealed a massive, sucking chest wound, one that bubbled and gasped for air in a grisly mockery of that dying boy's struggle for oxygen. But as Caleria, the Farah, and Henno stared in silence at the tattooed brute, suddenly Maul himself was overcome with shock as he gazed upon a face that was far too familiar to him, a visage that was familiar not just in his remembrance of it, but because it resembled his own face before it was covered in those shimmering blue runes. And as Maul stared at the tall, noble, scowling woman, as he stared at the ruthless queen of the Farah, he stammered out a single word, an elvish name that he hated and reviled, and now broke his promise to never use. Grathana? If you've made it this far, you're clearly digging SKALD. So please, help the show by writing a good review on iTunes. If you leave a good one, I'll read it right here. Nick J. Koch says this about SKALD. Great narrative with intriguing characters. It is the best spoken word narrative that I've ever listened to. Interesting world, detailed expertly. I would highly recommend it. SKALD is something totally unique. One story, one writer, one performer, one take. It's also a throwback to an older time, an attempt to revitalize one of the oldest storytelling mediums in existence, the spoken word. And now you have a chance to actually become a part of SKALD by becoming a patron of The Only Story That Matters on Patreon. Head to patreon.com/SKALD today to sign up. Please talk about SKALD on social media and make sure to tag me so I can share your posts. I'm Aubrey Sitterson on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and Snapchat. And I am shameless. I share all compliments and all positive reviews. You can also hit up AubreySitterson.com for links to everything, including SKALD, my wrestling talk show Straight Shoot, my comics work, bio, contact information, and more. It's been a minute since I've plugged one of my Dark Myths label mates, so that changes now. Go check out Bohemican. It's a look at the culture of the Czech Republic, also known as Bohemia, and it's from Pete Coleman and Travis Dow. Head to bohemican.com, that's BOHEMICAN.com, for links to their podcast, their YouTube channel, and more. For history fans, this thing is a must, as it covers a European country with which you might not be as familiar as others. Bohemican.com. Check it out today. Thanks for listening. I'll talk at you next week.